Today I'm talking to Susan Heim, who is the author of the new Chicken Soup for the Soul book, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Inspiration for Writers, 100 Motivational Stories for Writers, budding or best-selling, from books to blogs, and several other Chicken Soup books, which we'll get to in a minute. But before we even go there, Susan, I want to talk about chocolate. Because I read in an interview with you that it's one of your favorite. It is your favorite writing snacks, and it's turning out to be something of a theme, I guess, in these interviews. Because a few months back, I interviewed fantasy author Michael Scott, who told me that he'd once been paid in chocolate. What's your favorite chocolate?
Oh, it's got to be dark chocolate for sure.
oh, good. Then we'll definitely get along. So, as I mean, there's obviously 101 stories in the book, and we couldn't even begin to cover even the tiniest proportion. But I do want to ask you about two that leapt out at me, and as I mentioned to you before we went live, I also have had the privilege of interviewing two of those authors. One is J.A. Jens, the mystery writer, and one is Jenna Glatz, who had a wonderfully inspirational story about overcoming agoraphobia and ghostwriting the Celine Dion biography. Can you tell us a bit about those two stories? And because they are incredibly inspirational stories, whether you're writers or not, but certainly for other writers.
They are. I'll talk about the Jenna Glatzer story first. Her story was called Celine and Me, and as you just mentioned, she was asked to write an authorized biography of Celine Dion, and of course, amazingly, she got this offer. She'd never written a book before, except for some sort of children's educational books or something like that, but she had sent in some articles and things to an editor, saying, if you ever have any projects for me, any ghostwriting projects or whatever, let me know. And this particular editor at the publishing house offered her the job of writing Celine Dion's biography based merely on a newspaper article that she had written. She said that she just loved her heart, and how she wrote the story. And so after Jenna quit jumping up and down for joy that she had gotten the job, she suddenly realized, what did I just do? Because she had a panic disorder. It suddenly occurred to her that, hey, if I'm going to write a book about Celine Dion, I actually have to fly out to Las Vegas, where Celine Dion was living at the time, and interview her and spend time with her and talk to her, and she was afraid to get on a plane. So it's just an amazing story about how she had to overcome, even though she had started healing from some of her panic issues. This sort of forced her to, finally confront her demons and say, look, if I'm going to move ahead in life and be, a great writer and work with Celine Dion, I'm going to have to overcome my fears. And that's what she did. She, ended up going out there and writing this wonderful book. So another great part of that book, I think, was that she was kind of nervous about that story, was that she was kind of nervous about interviewing Celine Dion because, everybody told her, oh, celebrities are not going to treat you well, it's going to be really tough. And she said that Celine Dion just ended up being the biggest sweetheart ever, that she just loved working with her. So
it's truly a wonderful. It's a truly wonderful story. I think it's actually the story that opens the Chicken Soup book, if I remember correctly. And how did you? I know that you were the person who approached Jenna, but how did the Chicken Soup people even know that particular story to approach her in the first place?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I have to ask my publisher, Amy Newmark, how she, I know that she's the one that found her. I think it was one of those things where, somebody knew somebody else and said, hey, I got a great story for you, and, why don't I connect you? And she did, and fortunately when she turned the story into us, we all just, we loved it. It was such a great thing to do, and I think a lot of the stories are typical of this, where a lot of people have found real healing through writing, and that's what happened to Jenna. She couldn't ignore what she wanted to do, her passion for writing, and it really was healing for her to have to confront her fears and go out there and do what she wanted to do. So, we find a lot of those stories, in this particular book, and especially in the chapter called "Facing Your Fears."
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's as I say, it is an incredibly powerful story. And I remember I did talk to Jenna, and by the time the offer came in, as you say, she had faced some of the demons, but she certainly wasn't pleased with going on an airplane. Before that, she hadn't even been able to leave the house, and it was as serious as that. And it really is a huge story of healing and inspiration. I think so. Whether you're a writer or not, so many of us have fears that hold us back, and there's a situation where. She was panicking, I guess, until the moment she had to step on the plane. and again, as you say, afraid because everyone had said, what horrible people celebrities really were, and discovered not only that she could get there, but that Celine was just an absolute sweetheart. So, wonderful story.
A wonderful person.
And a very different but equally inspirational story, and this is less about confronting your fears and about maybe confronting your past, with J.A. Jance, the mystery writer.
Yes, I love this story too. She has a new book coming out, I understand, called Second Watch, and so this is actually the story behind the story that she tells in her new book. It's part of a series of based on a character called J.P. Beaumont, and she was trying to think of what her next book could be. I think she had written 20-some books in the series and was sort of thinking, gee, I kind of need to do something new here. And she finally figured out that she really wanted to do a prequel to the series. And she happened to remember that she went to high school with a boy who was just an amazing person, and it sounds like he was, outstanding scholar and an athlete, and he ended up going to Vietnam and was sadly killed. And unfortunately, J.A. Jance didn't find out about his death, until some weeks later after the funeral had already taken place, and she felt very guilty about not attending the funeral, even though she couldn't help it because she hadn't heard about it, but she still felt bad. And so remembering this story, she got a hold of his, the guy's name was Doug Davis, and she actually contacted the woman who was his fiancée at the time when he was killed, and started talking to her and really getting to know Doug Davis as a person, as the remarkable young man he was before he got killed. And she decided to write him into her new book. He's actually a character that her main character meets up with and interacts with in the book. And so she feels good about that, because she feels like she has really paid tribute to this young man. It's helped her overcome her guilt a little bit at not being able to attend his funeral, but I think even more importantly, she feels like she's given him life again by by bringing his story, into the book, at least, a little bit. So it's a great story.
A wonderful story, and I'll just point out that my interview with J.A. Jance is part of the series, so look for that interview in this conversations, this one-on-one conversation series. But again, it also speaks, I think, to where we writers find our material. Sometimes the oddest places, and the book itself is a wonderful and very powerful story. And again, whether you're a mystery fan or not, it moved me to tears at the end. And I think that if you again, like many of the stories in this book, it's very inspiring if you're a writer, but it's also very inspiring just in terms of being open to dealing with the past and being open to repairing perhaps what might need repairing from the past. Very, very powerful.
It's always so interesting to read about how people find their inspiration, from real life events like she did. So.
Right, or how their inspiration finds them, which is sometimes the case.
That's true. Sometimes that happens. It knocks them in the head,
So there are obviously 99 other stories in this book, plus the many I'm sure that couldn't fit. Is there any one or a few that for you, not as the person who put the book together, but as a writer, as a human being, that you found particularly personally powerful, that changed you in a way?
Oh, gosh, there were so many of them. One of the things that really stood out, though, was something that you just said, too, about, confronting your past and using writing, I guess, to deal with things in your past. And there was one story in there that really epitomized that, and it was called, what was it called? The Healing Power of Words, it was called, by Carissa Burroughs. I'm sorry, it was called The Small Miracle. It was in the chapter, The Healing Power of Words. And this affected me deeply, not so much because I had the same problems as she did, but just because so many people, I think, are looking for ways to heal and to become better people. And in this particular case, this woman had a lot of issues. She was just a ball of anger. She was severely overweight, she says. She was a heavy smoker. She needed surgery on her spine, and she was just basically a really nasty person, as she admits to herself. And finally, somebody convinced her, that she needed to have some therapy, and she needed to go talk to a therapist. And against her better wishes, she went and did that, but she basically sat there with her arms crossed and refused to talk to the therapist because she was just so bitter about it all. And finally the therapist said to her, okay, if you're not going to talk to me, I want you to write down your feelings. Just start out, write, I feel, and I want you to write, And so it took a couple of tries, but this woman finally did that. She started writing, and she said all of a sudden this floodgate just opened, and all of a sudden she was writing everything down, and all of her life was coming out on paper, and she realized that all of her words were reflecting the pain, that she was going through and that she had lived through. And it was really a turning point in her life where she was able to get her emotions out and express them, and she ended up losing over 100 pounds. She quit smoking, started writing stories. It's just, an amazing transformation, all because she started writing down her feelings. So that one just really touched my heart. It was very inspirational, and it made me think of all those times when I was a teenager, when I was just, as many teenagers were, you're very angst-ridden and upset with the world and angry, and, so many of us, especially young girls, I think, we wrote journals. We'd pour out our feelings in our journals and write them out, and suddenly, we'd feel a little bit better just to get it out. So that was a very touching story.
It's so true that pretty much anything that'll get stuff out of you and onto something else, whether it's a written page or a canvas because you're a painter or if you're a musician, whatever. Just using creativity to get out what's inside is just can be so powerful, and can ultimately, if it's shaped and molded, be so powerful for other people as well, because obviously we all have stuff we carry around, and it's not often as extreme as Carissa's story, but it's still there. And this is why when I teach writing, I really encourage people to get everything out in the first draft. Don't hold anything back, because whether or not that's going to be in an ultimate draft, it gets out of your system. And it really is so liberating and healing.
Yes, it is. It's great advice. Just get it all out on paper, and then you can always trim it back later. But like you said, it acts as a release, and it just, it's great to get that out. I think in this story, this woman was literally being poisoned by all the anger and the issues that she had inside of her, and it was just, incredibly healing to do that.
So let's talk a bit about Susan Heim, the writer, and because a lot of our people who watch and listen to this are also writers, which is again why I wanted you to talk about this particular book mostly. But I'm always interested in people's routines and processes and quirks, because we all have them. We don't always realize that we all have them. So one of the things that I know about you, because I've done a little bit of nosing around, is that well, I'm trying to get the chocolate, but I can't
I'm
hold
afraid.
you back because I'm as bad as you are. Is that there's probably a reason why we didn't do our interview first thing in the morning? Is that right?
That's true. I am not a morning person. Yes, I'm a night owl, and I would I'm much more alert at night and ready to write, when after the sun goes down. I don't know if I've got vampire blood or what in me. Mornings are not my time.
So is your next book Chicken Soup for the Vampire Soul?
Hey, that's a good idea.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think that a lot of I like asking this question of writers, because everyone has a different answer, and so many writing books, and I've written one too, but so many writing books talk about very strict routines, and I know that for many people that doesn't work. And certainly, I know clearly for you, sitting there at 9 o'clock in the morning and writing until 1 or 2, which many writers do, would be counterproductive.
Yeah. I always wished I were that kind of person, though. I mean, I know many writers who set their alarm at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and they'll write for an hour or two before the rest of the house gets up, and they're very productive at that time of day. And I'm jealous. I wish I could do that.
Well, it wouldn't work for me either. I actually tell a story in my memoir, which is called Act of Surrender, about a time when I felt really called to work on a book that I'd set aside, and I had this horrible, hateful job, and I knew that if I didn't write, I would lose my mind. what was left of it. And I was trying to figure out a way where I could put some writing time in, because plenty of people have jobs, right? And I thought, I could set my alarm, as you say, for 4 in the morning. And how many days would I actually do that before I stop? It was really an exercise in trying to find out what would actually work for me, and what kind of routine I could create for myself that would not only make sense but would survive. And I think so much about the creative process, which is not scientific by any stretch, is finding out what works for us. It's funny because Jenna too, Jenna Glatzer, Jenna too is a night owl and does not write during the day. And I interviewed another writer, DJ McIntosh, a thriller writer, who has insomnia. And she basically is up all night, but she's too tired to write, so she falls asleep early in the morning and starts writing at 2, because that's when her day starts. So, I mean, it's really, whatever works. So we now know that you write late. Do you have any other habits or quirks or anything that you're prepared to confess publicly?
Oh gosh. I have to have my laptop. So many people I have to have my desktop computer. It seems like so many people write on laptops and they can take their laptop anywhere and, they go to a coffee shop or something and write on it, and I just can't do that. I have to sit at my desk, and I'm a touch typist, so I think that has a lot to do with it because I'm used to my regular-sized keyboard on my computer, and so I can touch type doing that. But when I have a laptop or something, they generally have smaller keyboards, and I'm just not productive. I'm too trying to deal with the mouse and all the other stuff on there, and I don't know. It just doesn't work for me. I can only write well, at least, or productively when I'm sitting at my desktop. So it's kind of limiting, actually, because I'd like to be able to go other places, and sometimes I'll take a notepad with me, of course, and as I get ideas, I'll write them down, and but then I bring them home and sit at my desk and type them up. So.
I guess I shouldn't watch for you at Starbucks then. This is where I do a lot of my writing.
That's wonderful. I wish I could. I really do, but I don't know.
They'll have to. I actually once. I think it was in Starbucks. Saw now. Of course, this wasn't a computer with a tower. That wouldn't be possible. It was probably an iMac or something where it's just everything is in the monitor on the keyboard. I actually saw somebody sitting at a table in Starbucks or a coffee shop with an iMac-like computer working. So, there are options for you, Susan.
Yeah, it's true. I'm sure that many great novels have been written in Starbucks. I'm convinced of it. I don't think mine will be.
Well, speaking of novels, I also read that after many years of writing pretty much always nonfiction, that your next or a next project is fiction.
I know, yeah. That's a tough topic. And I'm the perfect example of, excuses and not being able to find time to write and looking for the perfect opportunity. And I do. I want to, all my books so far, like you said, have been nonfiction books, and I love fiction. I love to read fiction. I read it all the time. I'd rather read fiction than nonfiction. And so I want to write a fiction book, and I have some ideas, but I just need to do it. I need to get it done, and I'm not getting any younger, so it better be soon.
Well, now that you've put it out there in public for everyone to hear.
I know. I know. Well, they say that's what you should do. I read a story about a woman recently, and she said something like that. She had some sort of a writing goal, and so she put it on her blog, and she thought, oh, well, nobody's going to read my blog anyways, it's not a big deal. And then somebody responded and actually challenged her to actually meet this particular goal. And then she said, oh, rats, now I've got it out there. I have to do it. I promised this woman that I'd do it, and that was the motivation that she needed. So I guess I'm stuck now, right?
You're stuck now. We'll be checking back with you.
Yes, call me next year and see how far I've gotten on that novel.
Right. Well, maybe desktop computers at your desk are for nonfiction, and laptops and Starbucks are for your fiction.
Yeah. Well, that's what I keep telling myself I need to do, too. What I would really like to do, and this is an idea I actually got from a story in Inspiration for Writers, is to just go away for 2 weeks, to go by myself, go to a quiet inn or a hotel or something, and just completely devote my time to writing that novel, because I get so easily distracted. Because I have blogs and other businesses and things going on, and my children, of course, and sure. I just get so easily distracted. And so I think I might just have to book myself a 1 week or 2 week trip and go away and forget everything else and just write. But again, I'm going to have to take a laptop with me. So I'm going to have to, maybe as you said, that'll be my first novel. It'll be the laptop that'll do it. So.
Well, I'll share a story with you that may or may not help. Because when I wrote my first novel, I had no other books out, but I'd spent many years as a freelance writer, basically sitting at a desk, meeting deadlines, and I found that if I sat at my desk at my computer, that I had this kind of very uncreative production mentality that was getting nothing done, and so I began the novel. I wrote the whole novel longhand. I began the novel, and I never sat at my desk. I would always take a pad and sit someplace and write, and then type it up at night, because the computer had so many associations of different kinds of work that I couldn't bridge the gap. Now I can. I've been away from that other work for a long time. But then the only solution for me at the time was to get as far away from what I defined as work as possible. And so just offer that one out there for you.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think that's exactly my problem. It's too close to everything else. I keep thinking, I got to do a blog post, or I got to answer those emails, or something. So, yeah.
Yes, a laptop with no internet access.
I will get one and put no email on it, no nothing. I will wipe it clean and reserve it just for writing my book.
Well, and we will check back with you. So I do want to ask you a couple more questions because we're running out of time. One is, I know that, also because I've been nosing around, that Pride and Prejudice is one of your favorite books, and Elizabeth Bennet is one of your favorite characters from Pride and Prejudice.
You have been snooping around, haven't you?
I have been snooping around, yeah. Well, there is no privacy now that there's an internet. It's all out there.
It's all on the internet. I know.
So I want to ask you about you and Elizabeth Bennet and where you see maybe some similarities and maybe some differences, and why she in particular, out of the infinite number of even women protagonists has jumped out at you as somebody special.
I think I just love her spunk. If you're familiar with the characters that Jane Austen created, that a lot of them are, a couple of the women are kind of wimpy characters. One of them is kind of nasty, Emma, but when she first starts out. And I think Elizabeth Bennet is just, I love her spunk, even though she lived in an era when it wasn't easy for women to be themselves, to speak out for what they believed in, and to pursue a marriage partner that they loved instead of somebody that their family felt they should marry. She knew her own mind, and she wasn't afraid to speak out and to be herself, which is something I think I've always struggled with my whole life, insecurity, being afraid to be yourself, not being sure that people are going to like you for who you are, for being a writer or being somebody who likes literature or whatever the case may be. And so I really admire that. And Jane Austen was the same way. I think probably that Elizabeth Bennet was closest in personality to Jane Austen, because she was the same way. She lived during a time when women weren't really allowed to have careers, and she forged ahead anyways and wrote and never married, which was very much expected of women back in those days. And so they're, they have a lot of qualities that I admire, especially, considering the time period that they lived in.
And she wrote fiction.
Yes. Yes, and I love fiction.
Throw that in there.
Well, and when I was in high school too, I was always, my first love when I was in high school, of course, were those, torrid romance novels, and all the love stories and that kind of thing, and Jane Austen's novels, although they are considered romances, they always end up with the guy in the end. They're I think a step up from your typical, typical Barbara Cartland novel or something that's not quite as sophisticated. There are a lot of nuances in Jane Austen's novels that aren't just romance. So they're good.
So before I let you go, you do. I think you have a blog for writers, and from your experience both with the Chicken Soup book and your own experiences as a writer, and your own insecurities, which I think all creative people have. What kind of, just a couple of tips for writers or anybody creative that from your own experience that you can leave us with?
I think you really have to develop a tough skin, when you're a writer. Every writer I've ever talked to has been faced with numerous rejections. Look at all the famous J.K. Rowling and the Chicken Soup for the Soul Founders, and Stephen King. Any successful writer, I think, has their own stories about how many times they've been rejected and told that they can't write or they shouldn't write or they're terrible, or it's just such a subjective field. What appeals to one person may not appeal to another person. And you just really have to develop not only a thick skin, to handle that rejection, but also to be persistent, to be stubborn, to keep trying and keep moving ahead, even when people tell you, maybe you're not meant to write, or maybe you should try something else, or whatever. You got to be stubborn. I'm going to keep doing this anyways until I get it right, And we never get it right, of course, but at least until we're, find some success or get that book out that we've been wanting to write.